So first of all, welcome everyone to AES Malaysia section's monthly mixer meeting. This is our traditional monthly gathering that we do. Unfortunately, now during COVID, right, we do it online. But before this, in the past years, we always, we would always meet up in person. Usually hang out in a mamak lah, because in Malaysia that's the traditional meeting place for everyone lah. Hopefully, that time will come again where we can all hang out together in the mamas. But in the meantime, thank you so much, right? So we are doing this online, right, every month. Let me just quickly introduce myself. Okay, I am JD Wong. I am the current serving president of the AES Malaysia section. The topic of today's webinar/presentation is Dolby Atmos. And although when you see the poster, the poster says Dolby Atmos, Apple Music, and Spatial Audio. Geoffrey, who is our presenter, is going to cover not just purely on music as well, but other areas as well. Because for all of us here, some of us are from different fields of audio as well. So we will widen the scope a little bit. Geoffrey will widen the scope a little bit to also include other areas. We are very, very honored and very, very thankful to have with us a special guest presenter. His name is Mr. Geoffrey Lau, all the way from Dolby in Singapore. All right. Thank you so much, Geoffrey, for joining our meeting.
Most welcome. I'm very happy to be here.
Geoffrey's background and his details, I'll let Geoffrey maybe introduce himself in a short while. Okay, right? I did write it all down in the event, so you can also go and read, right? What Geoffrey's background and accomplishments are. Without further ado, I'll hand off the session. I'll hand off this meeting to Geoffrey.
Okay, thanks, JD. Thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm very happy to be here. As you know, I work for Dolby, and this is kind of like my job, and it's something I have to do. I'm actually in Dolby a content relations manager or content engineer, and what I do is to actually build the content ecosystem that supports Dolby technologies. I will explain to you what Dolby technology is about. Today, we are here to talk about Dolby Atmos. That's one of the technologies that Dolby has developed. My job is to really build the ecosystem, train, create awareness, troubleshoot. Anything requires that you require to build or create content with Dolby technologies. And because of that, I'm very happy to be here. Not just part of my job, but very happy to meet fellow sound engineers. I'm a sound engineer personally myself. JD and I was just chatting earlier. I'm similar to him. I came from a music mixing background. I was working in a studio that was the synchro sound equivalent in Malaysia, which was Form Recording Studios in Singapore. From there, I ended up meeting a lot of artists and stuff, and they dragged me out of the studio to do some live work, like concert work, like FOH monitoring work, simply because I was the engineer that was went through the whole process, the album, so I kind of knew the songs before anyone else. So when they needed to go play live, they kind of pulled me along, and I had an opportunity to do that. And then after that, they said, well, when you do a concert, there's 10,000 people, 20,000 people, but on TV there is like 1 million people easily. So they say, so they pull me along to the TV station and like, Jeff, can you just help us with the sound? So that's how my kind of experience grew from a studio person. I did a little bit of FOH monitorings in concert, live sound, and then I also did live broadcasts and stuff like this. And when I did live broadcasts, it was the time where kind of 5.1 was coming along. I was a Dolby consultant for a little while, like a part-time one. In the event of something that they had to teach in 5.1 or something like this, I would help Dolby. And in 2018, eventually, I joined Dolby as a full-time staff. So again, this is my job. I was very excited to join Dolby simply because, 5.1 has been around a very long time. Astro has been using this since for at least more than 10 years. All the content in Astro literally have 5.1 soundtrack. I was very happy to join Dolby about 3 years ago simply because at that point, I already know that there is this thing called Dolby Atmos. In fact, in 2016, Dolby gave me an opportunity. I kind of interned at Dolby. They actually trained me in Dolby Atmos. When I learned about Dolby Atmos, I was really very excited, and I really thought very well of this technology, and I'm very happy to come and share this with you today. So pretty much that's like my experience or career in like 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Yeah. So again, very happy that I'm talking to sound engineers, and I can use terms that you will understand, and non-sound engineers wouldn't understand. But if you don't understand anything, please feel free to ask me or type in the chat. I'm very happy to answer questions. If this is the first time you're hearing something about Dolby Atmos and you're kind of like lost, not to worry. It took me a while to kind of learn Dolby Atmos as well, because Dolby Atmos kind of changed the paradigm of audio. And I'm very happy to be able to introduce this to you tonight if it's the first time you're hearing about Dolby Atmos or hearing from me. Right, so let's start. So what we'll do today is let me introduce a little bit about Dolby and what does Dolby do and stuff like this. And please feel free to shoot out in a Q&A, because I know you guys are all sound engineers or audio engineers at some kind of audio, whether it's studio or live sound or cinema or broadcast or even audiologists. So please feel free to ask me any questions. I would really enjoy answering the questions. So let me start. So Dolby is ultimately a technology company. It started out like 50 years ago, and it's as old as Singapore, so to speak, since we gained our independence. And this Dolby has always been trying to provide some technology to bring about the spectacular experience for content. So in the very early days, Dolby, the first technology it developed was noise reduction. I'm not sure anybody in the crowd will actually realize or know anything about Dolby's noise reduction, but that is the first technology they ever built, and or even use Dolby noise reduction as a technology when they were recording on tape. I don't know. I hope somebody in the crowd, JD, is there anybody in the crowd that would have recorded on tape, or have you recorded on tape personally?
Yep, I have remembered the good old days, and having to remember to switch on the Dolby noise reduction. I think Seattle would definitely as well, be someone
Okay.
who's background in tape.
Cool. So yes, so Dolby has always been a technology company. In earlier days, they were selling products, but today we don't sell many products. We still have products. In fact, the latest product from Dolby is actually speakers. Dolby eventually bought a speaker company after all these years, and we have our new Dolby speakers. However, our main thing is really to actually bring about technology that will provide a spectacular experience. So where science meets art and where technology meets imagination. And I actually really like this, where science meets art and technology meets imagination, because this is very much what we do as sound engineers. If like many people think that sound, I'm sure you agree with me that many people think that sound engineers are just people pushing faders, turning something on and off, and oh yeah, you have to put your EQ at these frequencies. And you know that they are very wrong, because in a lot of what we do, there's a lot of creative art form involved, and there is no fixed way to kind of mix a song or process a sound or something like this. So this is where Dolby come in, like providing the technology that meets your imagination, because I find sound engineers are, they are people who grasp the science and the craft at the same time. So that's the kind of why I kind of did this slide. And it's also because, you guys are all sound engineers and or have a passion for audio, which is something very, very interesting. And in today's context, there's just so much technology with it that it's just beyond even my imagination when I first encountered this. So because it's a technology company, it's been many, many years where they had come up with many product. And like say 50 years ago, you have the Dolby noise reduction, and 30 years ago they got involved in movies and stuff, and we were also very involved in doing kind of coming up with a 5.1 format, and then after that we were there was Pro Logic, there was Dolby E. I wonder if anybody have seen all the Dolby technologies. The reason why I put this slide is because the technologies that Dolby provide is so wide that you can't say, oh, let's Dolby this, or this is Dolby, because it's actually so wide. And it being so wide is actually the reason why we are the only company in the world with this end-to-end proposition. So what do I mean by that? And this is what I mean, like the entire Dolby, right, is an end-to-end ecosystem of delivering spectacular experience to the audience. So we start from the creation stage, where you have seen our formats like Dolby Atmos. There's Dolby Audio. Dolby Audio just simply means 5.1. There's always Dolby Surround and 7.1. This is more on the theatrical side of things. And then what we do is we also have the codecs to transmit all these formats. And then after that, we get them encoded, we get them packed nicely, we get them sent across the transmission paths and stuff. And at the playback device, what happened is we can decode these streams, and then we can ensure that this decode at the playback device, it is exactly how the master was created, and how the director wanted the content to be heard, or how you wanted your mixes to be heard. And there is no such company in the world with this end-to-end proposition. We have competitors in every block of these 3 blocks, from start to end. But there is only one Dolby that is able to carry this from the very beginning, okay, and the creation of the formats, encode the format, pack up the formats, and then after that, make sure that it's decoded very nicely at the playback device. So this is the technology or the ecosystem or our value proposition that will bring about the spectacular experience. And today, obviously, all of us are mostly, I would believe, just in the first part of it, the creation process, or what we call production. There might be some engineers from TV stations that look after transmission and stuff, and there might be some engineers that are working for consumer devices. So, in Dolby, there are engineers in every part of the world, in every of these 3 parts. I'm, of course, in the front part, but I have a colleague that is working with Samsung, JBLs, and stuff like this, that has Dolby technology built into these devices, and then ensuring that when it receives a Dolby stream, it gets decoded nicely and playback nicely. We need to understand this when we look at Atmos, because Atmos is an end-to-end ecosystem. Once you understand this, and then you realize actually how brilliant it is, and how we have kind of changed things a little bit in the audio space. So we have partners in every part of the ecosystem. So obviously in the creation, all the creation studios like Netflix, TV, Disney and stuff like that, TV stations or cable TV, so to speak. And then of course the big names, Universal's, Netflix, Viacom, Apple. Okay, these are all content studios are creating content. There are people who distribute it, obviously Netflix, Disney Plus, they are like the OTT platform. So they are distributing it. And then obviously these are all the consumer brands that actually carry out technologies. And you can see this, all your famous hi-fi brands or consumer devices brands or prosumer brands and stuff like this, speaker brands and all this. So it is after all an end-to-end ecosystem where we create and at the OEM ensure that it's playback correctly. And then the device, we have about 120 plus TVs, 250 AVRs, 50, and all, and the numbers goes on. And all these Dolby Atmos compatible. That means if it receives a Dolby Atmos stream, you know what to do with it. So what do you mean by know what to do with it? I'll explain a little bit further as we go into what Dolby Atmos is. But just that there are many devices out there that can play back a Dolby Atmos stream. First of all, obviously your iPhone, and among other things. And then from there, and if we can play back some form of Dolby Atmos, it will give you what we call an immersive experience, which is something that we will talk more about. And these are some pictures of the devices from soundbars and tablets like iPads, iPhones, home theater systems, headphones, so to speak, and stuff like this. And at this moment, there are about 1,000 over these Dolby Atmos cinema titles worldwide. And then there are about 750 plus Dolby Atmos home titles to date. However, I think these are numbers that are kind of backdated to last year or something. I think the numbers have increased. It's just that I can't find a nice enough slide to update this. So I kind of left it as there, but it's definitely a few more than 750 at this point. Just that many movies that you watch have actually adopted the Dolby Atmos technology, and now we even have like Dolby Atmos in music as well. So the momentum has definitely started. Dolby actually released Dolby Atmos in 2012, and it was mainly for the cinemas. And then as the format evolved, it went into the home theaters, which is the department of Dolby that I'm kind of from. I don't look after any of the cinema stuff. If you like to know more about cinema stuff, please just let me know, because I have a colleague that looks after the cinema stuff. But I know a little bit of that. And then I look after anything outside the cinema. So anything from music to OTT platforms like Netflix and stuff like that, broadcasting, stuff like that. I look after it. And today's focus is really Dolby Atmos for home entertainment, as I have written on the title page. So these titles are also available in home entertainment, and of course Dolby Atmos music is all part of home entertainment. And I think at this point there is like 4,000, maybe 3,000 plus songs out there that is available in Dolby Atmos. And I hope you at some point is able to experience or enjoy or have this chance to experience Dolby Atmos at some form or another, like be it spatial music or spatial audio on Apple Music, or has been to a Dolby Atmos cinema, or as a home theater system, or recently bought a soundbar because of the lockdown, and then you had Dolby Atmos in the soundbar and you've enjoyed it somehow, or you've seen it on Netflix or somewhere. That brings me to, so what is Dolby Atmos, and what makes Dolby Atmos so interesting? As you already know, Dolby is an end-to-end ecosystem. We have an end-to-end ecosystem, and our aim is to bring to you spectacular experiences. So in the past, what we have done is that we have mixed music in so-called what we call a channel-based methodology or channel-based way. That means we go up to a mixing console like what you would normally do, and you would buzz or use a pan knob to move the sound, the origin of the sound, all the way to a particular channel or speaker or bus. So if you had a stereo mixer, you would just bus everything to left or right. If you had maybe a wider mixer, like a 5.1 mixer, you could bus something from, or pan something from left, right, center, left surround, right surround, LFE. Just like this picture here. This is like how a cinema would normally have it. So you have the left, center, right speaker. There's an LFE speaker that behaves like an aux. Then you could pan it to the left surround speaker or right surround speaker. So this is what we have been doing traditionally. And like I mentioned earlier, Dolby Atmos actually changed the paradigm of this a little bit. Actually, not a little bit, actually quite a lot. Dolby actually sat down and realized that, okay, let's look at what's wrong with today's sound formats, right? So one is only a horizontal plane. Like there is no real sound format other than a really immersive sound format that allows you to pan like a full-on 360. I mean, this was like year to 2010 and all this, when they were all thinking about this. I don't know exactly when they started thinking about this. I know they released Atmos in 2012, but a few years back of that, they were thinking about this, like, okay, there's no format that is really give you a full 360 panning. With channel-based mixing, right, we are always doing some form of a sound mix compromise. So what do you mean by a sound mix compromise? It means that we are trying to put the sound where the speaker is, not where we want the sound. So I'm quite sure as sound engineers or audio engineers or audio professionals out there, you would have encountered this at some point. Maybe not think about it so explicitly, but I'm quite sure you would have thought of this. Like, okay, I only have left and right speaker, so I can only put the sound within this left and right speaker. And as you know, we are taught in the books like, okay, don't put anything of the sound outside the left and right speaker, because that's what we call out of phase. And, the teacher will scold you about it and all this kind of thing. Yeah, so we were always compromising putting the sound as in where the speakers were or where the buses allow us to go. With 5.1 is the same thing. You had an extra center speaker, which made it very, very useful. We had surround speakers so that people can be inside the sound rather the sound being in front of you. Obviously, with stereo, we have what we call stage sound. I call it stage sound because I'm always mixing in the vision of a stage, as in a band in front of me in a stage, or a scene in front of me as a stage. So it's either left, right, a little bit front or a little bit back. We had to deal with a lot of things with phantom center. So it's always a compromise somewhere. And obviously, we learned how to use the stereo format very well. There's so many tricks after stereo came out in 50 years ago. And there were so many tricks to really get good sound out of stereo. And that's really good. And there are also many tricks to get good sound out of 5.1. But they are all channel based. That means two big things happen. One, we are always compromising because we are trying to find the position of the speaker. And then secondly is once you mix to this mix, right, you cannot change it. That means if you have mixed it in stereo and somebody wants 5.1, then you got to scratch your head a little bit and say, okay, how am I going to get 5.1 out of it? You can get a 5.1 mix to derive a stereo mix, eventually a mono mix. But if you had a stereo mix, how can you go upwards? Or if you have mixed a movie in 5.1, but going to the cinema in 7.1, then you go scratching your head. Okay, should I just copy the rear speakers, or should I just call up my session and try to pan things in between those speakers, or try to spread it wider or something like this? So we are always compromising at some point, and Dolby decided that, okay, I want something to fix that. So you will always have playback inflexibility. That's what I just mentioned. And all this sums up to a natural output because we are trying to compromise and we are trying to work around what the speaker format has taught us to do, or work around what most playback system has taught us to do. So Dolby asked, like, okay, can we change that at all? Is there a way to solve these problems and go to the future with it? So they came out with an innovation, or Dolby came out with an innovation whereby let's not think so much about channel-based audio and look at object-based audio. With object-based audio, we are given the precise placement of sound, and so that we don't have to worry where the speakers are, right? And that will be a sound engineer's dream, right? It's like, I don't want, sometimes we get very technical. Okay, I'm mixing stereo. There are rules of stereo. What if I tell you there were no rules, right? And just try to do whatever you want? How about a format that could be adaptive to any playback environment? That means if I mix it in this format, right, I don't have to worry if it's playback on stereo, playback on 5.1, playback on 7.1, or even wider formats than that, or even wider formats that I cannot think of today. Like, for example, maybe 5 years later, someone comes out with a very popular soundbar and its format is like a 12.1.4, which we've not heard of today. You don't want to go back to the movie you mixed today or something you mixed today at 5.1 to realize that, okay, how am I going to get my 5.1 mix to sound okay on a 12.1.4, because everybody wants to hear it on 12.1.4 today. So the answer is Dolby Atmos. And what we do is we use a way of mixing in object base, which is we get the audio track. Instead of busing it to left bus, right bus, or channel bus, we just store an XYZ coordinate for the track. We don't mix with the speaker design in mind. We mix in an imaginary three-dimensional space. So based on that concept, that is what Dolby Atmos is about. So Dolby Atmos, in short, is just three things. So one is the format that gives you full 360 degrees immersive placement of the sound. That means you can place it 360 degrees. Because it was first designed for cinema, we use the three-dimensional rectangular as the space to use it as a gauge for your imaginary space. So anywhere you can position the sound anywhere in this rectangle. Okay, so you see all these green little dots. These green dots are actually audio signals and levels. And this is where you position it, just like where you want to pan it. Okay, I want to put it left, I want to put it right. I want to put it where my aircon is up there. And it's all up to you. We don't think about whether, okay, is there a speaker there? Can we put it there? Like, when you think about mixing in stereo, say, okay, I want to have the sound in the back, but I can't because there's no sound. There's no speaker in the back that's going to play that back, right? So what are we going to do, right? So here, we don't worry about this. We actually says, okay, just let's have this rectangle and let's position the sound anywhere you like. And the Dolby technology would actually take that and then move it to a playback device. And at the playback device, we do a handshake. When this Dolby Atmos file that you created mixing in Dolby Atmos in this imaginary 3D reaches a three-dimensional space, not three-dimensional space, reaches a playback device, what will happen is it will kind of do a handshake. And it says, you are like a cinema. And in this cinema, what happens is, the director has wanted to put the sound on the high left of me. And based on this handshake, the mapping is red, and our Dolby playback system would actually send that sound, which is maybe this little dot that you made here, and send it to the closest speaker to that position. And then after that, it says, okay, maybe the rear aircon, I want it rear high up there, just where my picture, the aircon is. Then is this little dot here, which is, they'll find the speaker closer to that. And if in a case where they cannot find a speaker closest to that position, what they'll do is they'll find the nearest speaker and send that sound to the nearest speaker and do some phase correlated processing and stuff like this to give you the virtualization or the perception that the sound is up there. So all this is orchestrated by our technology and at the playback device and mapped to the playback device so that your mix or your Dolby Atmos format or your Dolby Atmos master will play back and adapt to any playback format that is possible. So it goes to a laptop or mobile phone. Okay, I'm sorry, but laptop, mobile phone can't do much. No worries, but it will still fold everything down nicely and render it down to a stereo version so that it's still listenable. There will still be immersive information inside the stereo version. However, obviously, it won't sound as good as if you had ceiling speakers and all this, but it is still listenable. So it's because of that, it becomes very scalable because you don't have to go and create a stereo mix just because you had to put it on a laptop or you want to make it sound good. And then after that, you have this other thing about headphones. The whole world has kind of been headphones have been very, very popular lately because obviously people are traveling, maybe not so much today, but people when travel, they all put on headphones and stuff like this. And how can you recreate immersive audio on headphones? So for headphones, again, when the Dolby Atmos master file is sent to the playback device, it does the handshake, says, I'm going to go on headphones. And when you go on headphones, what it will create a three-dimensional listening experience called binaural, based on how you have mixed it with these dots and rectangular positioning where you have done. And it will actually create a binaural render on your headphones so that when you put in your headphones, you will hear the binaural version of your immersive mix. So it will actually be compatible from all the way from headphones to laptops, stereo speakers to multi-channel soundbars, virtualizing soundbars, all the way to maybe a home theater or a full-on cinema. So this is a format that is totally adaptable and scalable, and it is based on the fact that we have changed the way to mix from mostly a channel-based format to an audio object-based format, and it is a format that can do a full 360 thing. And like I said, you have seen the applications. It's used in cinema. It's used on streaming platforms like Netflix and Disney Plus and other streaming platforms as well. And it's used on Apple Music. And all this is to deliver immersive experience, a spectacular immersive experience or listening experience of the content to your listeners or to the listeners. And it's just totally scalable in the sense that when it's, like I said, after 3 years or 5 years, somebody comes out with a new format, a really cool soundbar, but it's 12.1.4. So again, the Dolby Atmos Master will reach the 12.1.4 soundbar and do a handshake and mapping and says, okay, I know where your speakers are. The director had want the sound this place. Okay, this is the nearest place to it. I'll send the sound to it. That I want it there. Okay, you have a so-called a ceiling speaker or a height reflection speaker, so-called a up-firing speaker. Okay, I'll send it to up-firing speaker so that it reflects off your ceiling and you hear it as if it's on the ceiling. So very scalable in the future. You don't have to worry. Even a few years time, you don't have to worry what channel-based formats are there. Dolby Atmos will be able to scale to that or adapt to that. So this is what makes Dolby Atmos really special, and how it has been able to be used to bring immersive experiences to all the contents, from cinematic to streaming to even music. And you can see the few pictures I've shown, and it's from cinematic, home theater and stuff, and then even to on the go where it's headphones. And I'm sure somebody in this call would have an AirPod or something, and you would have heard Apple Music in spatial audio and like, oh wow, it's sounding much bigger and three-dimensional and stuff like this. So this is what the format does, and this is kind of how it works. And this is the music part. So we had Tidal Music doing this. We have this spatial audio by Apple Music, and now we are even looking into podcasts. So some of the I think podcast is one of the biggest audio entertainment talked about audio entertainment today. And there is a Earshot in India that is actually using Dolby Atmos for podcasts, and telling their audio stories, telling their presentations in 3 dimensions. And this is one of the tracks they have, where you can listen to the sound of the forest, and stuff like this. So if you can get this app, you can check it out. I'm not so sure if you can get it here. However, we know that Earshot is the India's newest digital destination for news and entertainment. They actually offer Dolby Atmos and obviously spatial audio, and of course Dolby Atmos music on Tidal. Amazon does it as well, but I think Amazon Music is not so available in this region. There are different formats that you can play it back on, and this formats is the home entertainment way of representing the 3-dimensional space. I just put this just in case people didn't understand. Many times when I give presentations, they always tell me, oh, this slide is really helpful because I finally understood what these numbers meant. So just in case you didn't know, 5.1 means there are 5 speakers or 5 channels on the surrounds, and there's left, center, right 3, and then left surround, right surround. The 0.1 is the subwoofer, the one that has the rumbling sound that goes like this, and that's what we call LFE, which is low frequency effects. And when you have the third number comes in, 0.2 means the number of height speakers you have. So when you say 0.2, means there are 2 ceiling speakers, and they are right in the middle of this 5.1 setup. And if you had a 5.1.4, that means you actually have 4 speakers, front and back. 7.1, you have more speakers on the surround, which you have, instead of just left surround and right surround, you have left surround, right surround, left rear surround, and right rear surround. And 0.2, obviously two ceiling speakers. 7.1.4 is pretty much a standard for the studios, where you have 7.1, 7 speakers surround, 1 LFE, and 4 speakers. And you can go up to something like a 912, which is on the surrounds. You not only have left surround, right surrounds, left rear, right rear. In the front, you have another pair of surrounds, and we call this left wide and right wide. The reason why we like 9.1 is because if you're a film mixer or movie mixer, you'll find that a lot of the musics are usually very wide to create space to put the dialogue and the action sequence in the center or in the left, within the left LCR, and sometimes there's no space for music, so many people actually pan them a little wider into the left wide speakers and right wide speakers, and then you get a really nice spread of sound in front of you, from dialogue to effects to music. So that's why we have something like 9.1, and then you have, of course, the standard one is the 5.1 for multi-channel audio. I kind of just put this slide because it's very interesting that people always tell me, oh, now I finally know that when I go to the shops, I can't remember what's the consumer shops in Malaysia, like a Best Denki or Norman Jones, where you just go there and see all the consumer electrics, and then you'll see some soundbar and says, "Oh, I'm a 5.1.2 soundbar," and what does that mean? So this is kind of what it means. So that's pretty much the Atmos format in itself. Is anybody like really lost at this point and have no idea what I'm talking about? Or everybody's kind of good and kind of starting to realize, okay, this is going to change something. Oh, cool. I get a lot, I can see some of the reactions. That's nice. Okay, so I assume nobody is like really lost or anything. So let me just move on to talk about, right? Like at this point, you must be really curious, right? Oh, cool. So how can I start creating content in Dolby Atmos, right? It's like, is there any special thing that we need or what has changed? Yes, actually the production process has changed. And this is where I kind of tell you what has changed and how it has changed and how you can actually start doing Dolby Atmos content at the end of this webinar or seminar. And there's tons of help now on the YouTube. Obviously, when it started in the early days, I think Dolby was the one providing all the help. But I think these days, if you search on YouTube and stuff, you find pretty much a lot of information. And Dolby itself has many, many links. I'll share with you guys later at the end of the presentation. I'll actually give it to JD, which can distribute to you guys. And there are many links that actually helps people understand more about how to create content in Dolby Atmos. Right. So with Dolby Atmos, right, this is the interesting part of it. Like I just spent the last half an hour telling you about, okay, we're going to change things and we're going to do object-based audio and it's going to be adaptable and scalable. But because it was started mainly in the movie industry in 2012, I think it's almost 10 years ago when they first released Atmos, we gave the option of still being able to mix in channel based. So what do I mean by that? So in the Dolby Atmos format, right, there is an audio bed and then we have the objects which I've talked so much about. And then when we combine these two, it's the full on Dolby Atmos format. So when we talk about Dolby Atmos, right, then as you go into the production thing, and because you are all sound engineers, you need to understand the audio bit and you need to understand objects. And when you put them together, they are Dolby Atmos. So objects, I talk a lot about it. It's just the sound, like the sound of these birds croaking and singing and stuff like this, and the crocodile. Is there a crocodile or some reptile? And these are the sounds, and we put the 3-dimensional audio to it. So what are bits? So bits is your traditional channel-based mixing. That means your left, right, your 5.1, your 7.1.2. So you can still mix in bits and then add this with objects and you'll get Dolby Atmos. I call this the hybrid approach of static and dynamic audio, whereby the bed is static. That means it's just your traditional way of mixing, but we actually add the objects. I think this was probably done because you can imagine in 2012 when you brought Dolby Atmos to a film re-recording guy and he says, hey, let's forget about your 7.1, which I know you're very good at, and let's just mix in objects. He'll look at you with a very big question mark, right? And like, no, this is due next week. Please get out of my face because I have no time to change everything now when it's due next week. So I guess Dolby went there and says, okay, don't worry, you can still do 7.1, which you're very good at. And then maybe I can give you this sound that you can actually pan across your head because the picture requires it to in a big spaceship flying over your head. You could do that with objects or something like this. So I guess that was done this way, but the way I look at it is that the fact that it can also take objects, it creates a very good path because there is still merits in mixing in some objects in some way, so that you can still translate some of your older stuff or some of the more static stuff in the audio bed. So we have the bed, which is usually your room tone, your forest sound and stuff like this, and then plus the highlights, which is the animal sound, and you combine together, you get a full immersive effect, which is your 3-dimensional space. Now that you understand this concept, this is how it looks like in the production workflow. So if you look at this slide right down the middle, right, and you look towards the left of it, right, that's basically how we have been mixing audio today. Not 20 years ago when we had big consoles and stuff, but I think most people do it on a DAW today, which is what we call a digital audio workstation. And in this digital audio workstation, we'll play back the audio, mix the audio, and then eventually bounce the sound out. So you have all the elements of the mix. This is more of a music one. I took the music slide. There's another slide of this where it has room tone, dialogue, and stuff like this. So if you are a film mixer, just imagine that the lead singer is the dialogue, and then the room tones is the reverberation, some stuff like that. But it's still elements of the whole audio mix, and we actually record them, or we position them, or we drag them into our session, and then we create this whole session of like 100 over tracks, and then we try to balance them, and then we will output a mix, and then that it will be your stereo mix, or your 5.1 mix, or your 7.1 mix. So with Dolby Atmos, what we have changed is that the DAW don't complete the mix anymore. You require what we call a renderer. If you look at this little picture, this is our software, and you will need. This is the heart of every Atmos mix. So you need to start sending the sound from the DAW to the renderer. And like the previous slide I talked about, there's a bit and there's objects. So we allow you to transmit about the option of 128 tracks out of the DAW to our renderer. Our renderer will accept 128 tracks. And the first 10 tracks will always be reserved for the bits, right? And the first 10 tracks will be 7.1.2. This is the widest bit you can have. So you can have a static 7.1 and then plus 2 channels on top. The 2 channels on top simply means left ceiling and right ceiling. So with the bed, you can't move things in on top of the ceiling. You need an object to do that. However, it just gives you where for you to place the tone, like left ceiling and right ceiling. And these first 10 channels is reserved. That means you can choose to use the widest bit, which is 7.1.2, or you can just choose to use a stereo bit. And most musics are just made on a stereo bit because music people hardly ever mix anything out of stereo. So maybe the first thing they do is create a stereo bit. Then broadcast people will use a 5.1 bit. Full-on movie people, big feature film will use a 7.1/2 bit. Netflix uses a 7.12 bit, but if you choose to use a 5.1 bit, it's also possible. So the first 10 channels, according to your DAW, will be mixed accordingly like any other mixes that you have done, channel-based, and you can mix it to that. And then the next 118 channels you would use for objects. So one channel is like a mono sound, and then you put the XYZ coordinate. We see this positional metadata is the XYZ coordinate, and then we will have the audio and the XYZ coordinate, and we'll send it to the renderer. At the renderer, you will see these little green dots, and that's where we show you where the position is. Your DAW, like Pro Tools, or some other DAW, you would or might have what we call a three-dimensional panel. With the three-dimensional panel, as you move the sound, it will correspond a little dot in this imaginary space, and then as you move it, it will actually move the dots, and then that's how we are positioning the audio. We are not worried about where the speakers are. We are just positioning it at a three-dimensional space where we want to do it. And then this where the monitoring comes about, whereby you have a monitoring setup. It could be a 7.1.4 setup, a 5.1.4 setup. But this monitoring setup is what represents or plays back your three-dimensional space. I was just talking to a Thai mixing engineer like a week ago. He says, this is the coverage of 3D. So I just thought that was a really, really great way of explaining it. So to mix in 3D, you have to hear it in 3D, right? So your monitoring setup, a 7.1.4 setup or 5.1.4 setup is how you're hearing it in 3D. And as you move the objects around in that imaginary three-dimensional space in the renderer will output the monitoring for you to experience it and monitor it, or in audio engineering world, we call it critically listening to it, and you can do your mix and you can position your stuff anywhere you want in a three-dimensional space. Should you not have a 7.1.4 setup, not to worry, you can still start with the most basic one, which is a pair of headphones. And the renderer will create a binaural render of the three-dimensional space in binaural for you to start mixing it as well. You can start with it. It may not be as great as a fully calibrated 7.1.4 setup, but you can definitely start doing it. And some people are literally mixing Atmos with a pair of headphones, and it can be done. And it's very fun because all you need is just pretty much a laptop, which I'll explain more later. So the main point here is the changes to the workflow is that the DAW no longer actually exports some form of a mix. It actually sends the audio plus the panning metadata to the renderer. The renderer accepts it and use the three-dimensional data and the audio and render the sound out to the relevant speakers for you to hear the three-dimensional space. So the renderer, it's now the heart of the whole mix. And then from there, what we'll do is when you finish your mix, we will actually record your master file with a timecode sync. That's why you can see this little word here that I've added, plus LTC. So with a timecode sync, we will actually record a master file. I think if you know about Dolby noise reduction, you know that when you finish your mix, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, you couldn't bounce the mix like what we do today, or even the concept of offline bounce is totally not thought of at that time. You had to play and you have to have a mastering recorder. So it goes back to the same concept of a mastering recorder, which is you play the mix back, and then it goes to the renderer. The renderer will start recording as like a mastering recorder. I think some of you, your mastering recorder will be a 1/4-inch tape, a 1/2-inch master tape, maybe a DATs, or maybe if you're in the film world, some form of DA88s where you use that to back up your 7.1 mix. I'm not sure if anybody remembers a Tascam DA88. That was a little cassette or video cassette that could record 8 tracks of audio. They had a ADATs as well, which wasn't much used in the film world, but Tascam DA88s were used, and that's where that was your master recorder, and you could record your 7.1 mix into that, or record your stereo mix into a 1/4-inch master, or record your stereo mix into a DAT. I'm not sure if you have remember. I don't see a DAT very much, a digital audio tape these days. But for a while, that was the thing that I work with every day, right? So it's back to the concept of a master record. So you record a master file, and then from that master file, we will export the formats to delivery. So ADM-B wave is actually the most accepted delivery in most formats. Like even in streaming, they will accept ADM-B wave. Apple Music accepts the ADM-B wave. You can also export a coded version, that means we actually packed it up nicely and coded. It's like the so-called the MP3 versions, but it's compressed so that it doesn't take up so much space, but still giving the lossy, perceivable sort of immersive experience. Pardon my English there. So I got a bit tongue-tied, but you won't perceive the loss. That's what I mean. But it's still a lossy codec. Or you can just give it the master file that you recorded, which we call the Dolby Atmos master file. And there is also another format called the IAB, which is an MXF file for you to be included in a IMF package. That's another format. So you could export them to different formats, and they will take this and actually use this to distribute. So while you're exporting the master file format, you could also use the renderer to export what we call re-renders. So for example, like I mentioned, you could play it back on a stereo, or you can play it back, the monitoring plays back on a 714. So what happens is you could tell the renderer, says, okay, I want to have a full PCM so-called wave file that is 714, which is the left speaker will be one wave file, the right, the center, the LFE, all in this PCM. Or I just want a stereo wave file because I want it to be playable in every player possible that can handle a wave file. So you can ask the renderer export a stereo wave file. You can ask the renderer to export a binaural wave file, which is, then you can take it to any computer and hear the binaural, play it back on the set of headphones, and actually hear the immersive effect. Or you can take it to a 5.1 system, put it back into your DAW and hear it on a 5.1 system. You could do all that with what we call channel-based PCM renders. I'm quite sure you would know, most people know what PCM is. If not, I think JD can explain in the future what PCM stands for, but I'm quite sure 90% of you would know. Pretty much this is the whole workflow, and there are just three main components that you need to remember to start on Dolby Atmos. So one is your Dolby Atmos renderer, which is the heart of the whole thing, and of course your some kind of DAW and some kind of interface. And then after that, your monitoring setup, we can range something from a pair of headphones to a full-on multi-channel setup like 7.1.4 on even as high as something as 91.6. The renderer comes in two forms. The simplest form is what we call the Dolby Atmos production suite. This is what most of you would call native, means that the DAW and the renderer actually coexist in one computer. And how we use a virtual sound card or aggregate I/O. I think Pro Tools call it something like an aggregate I/O, or Mac also we have aggregate I/Os, which is like a virtual sound card. We created this virtual sound card called the Dolby Audio Bridge, and then from there your DAW can use Dolby Audio Bridge to send 128 channels of audio to the production suite, and the production suite will output the rendered audio to your sound card, which is a built-in output, or any kind of audio interface you can plug in. It will do that. So totally maintaining this workflow from DAW to the renderer to the monitoring. So this middle part is taken care of with our virtual sound card called the Dolby Audio Bridge. And then you can purchase this on the ABIT website, and like I mentioned earlier, you need this to create the Atmos master file or the music master file or the OTT master file, and it will render a monitoring everything from binaural to something like 916, and it will monitor the loudness and true peaks, which you need for file delivery, which I'm not going to talk so much today. And what happened is if your DAW doesn't have a surround panel or three-dimensional panel, not to worry. We have this plugin called the Dolby Atmos Music Panel, which will pimp your DAW up with the three-dimensional panel. And this is usually used in Logic Pro, Ableton Live, but today's Steinberg, Nuendo, Pro Tools, Blackmagic Resolve, they all have a three-dimensional panel built in already, so you won't need this. But if you're using something like Ableton Live and Logic Pro, you get this. We give this for free. The reason why this is called music panel, because when we give this out for free, we added a little sequencer at the bottom, and this sequencer is actually timed to the tempo of your DAW. So the music mixers will find tempo a little bit more relevant, whereby you could create so-called, I call them dancing objects, which means that you could create short sequences of movements, like things moving this way or just moving front and back, and then use these little buttons to trigger these patterns on the sound. So it's great for little things that move, especially in kind of dance music kind of scenario where you have little tweaky sounds that you want to move them consistently, much like a tremolo guitar or something. You could create these short sequences, and then it will go, and then you can time these sequences to the tempo of the music, which makes it very exciting and very fun to play with. And I suggest that you just, if you are like a Logic user or something, or even if you are Pro Tools and you want to use this, you can as well. It's a little bit messy to kind of arrange it in Pro Tools, but if you do the housekeeping, it's no problem, because Pro Tools already have a 3D panel and it's already have features that can help you do that. But if you want to use this, Fine by Us too is something we give free. You can just download you go to the link and download it. I'll give you a whole set of links later on, so not to worry, and you don't have to really copy this down. But yes, so in case your DAW does not have a full three-dimensional panel, we have one for you. If you don't see your DAW on this list, we are working on it. You can try to pimp the panel to work. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. We can't guarantee it. I can only assure you that we are working on increasing this list as we move on in the future. I have received many requests from people who wants Reaper to be on the list, who wants a Pro Sonar Studio One to be on the list. So just in case you're going to ask me the question, I'll answer it first. Yes, we are working on it. No, I don't know when it's going to come out, but we are working on it. That's all I can say. So that's for the panel. So moving forward, by the end of the night, you should be able to start doing this simply by you get a free panel, you have Logic or Pro Tools. I'll send you a link to download a 90-day trial for the Dolby Atmos production suite, which can be installed in your computer. As long as it is a Mac, I'm sorry for the Windows users, but we don't really have a elegant workflow for Windows at this point. Again, we are working on it. However, my next slides might explain better. So for Mac, if you have a little MacBook and it's running OS 13.6 and above, you can just download this free panel, this renderer, and have your DAW going and use Dolby Audio Bridge to send the audio over, and then have a nice pair of headphones. And then you can literally start creating Dolby Atmos or doing 3-dimensional immersive audio tonight, like after I finish talking. So it is literally as simple as that. Obviously, there'll be troubleshooting and stuff if it doesn't work, but not to worry. We have you can just search on the web, and we have our website like dolbyprofessional.com, and you can just go there, and there's a whole forum, just like Gear Slut forum, similar to that, and you can get most of your answers. And we have designed the search engine such that you can literally ask the question like Google, or how do I do this, or renderer receive no sound, or something like this, and you actually find a lot of answers, and come up with a checklist to think. And the full on, even your 90-day trial, you can export the relevant files, the Dolby Atmos master file, the ADM files. Is fully functional demo. You can literally create the mix and send it to Avid Play, and then Avid Play might put it on Apple. We pass all the requirements and stuff like this. And you can do all your channel-based deliverables, like, send out a binaural mix to somebody to check it out and says, oh, this is my first immersive 3D mix on Dolby Atmos, so that he doesn't have to actually also download the renderer to hear it. It's just a standard WAV file. The only limitation to that WAV file is just binaural, right? And we know that in binaural, you cannot hear it unless it is on a pair of headphones, because that's the theory of binaural, right? So that's the only limitations. But other than that, it's pretty much the same. If that is the so-called the easiest way, the lowest barrier of entry, and if you're in this call and says, oh no, I am the top engineer in Malaysia right now, and I work in a big studio, and I want a full-on setup because all my mixers are epic, right? Because if they need to mix something like 32 tracks of music, usually any laptop will run 32 tracks. But when it becomes 160 tracks of epic rock music with orchestra and full-on 24 tracks of drum set and 24 tracks of backing vocals and or guitars and stuff, that would drive your computer with much limitations, because your one computer or your native computer has to run your DAW and the renderer together at the same time to give you the rendered 3-dimensional mix. So with the full-on setup, we have the second flavor of the renderer, which is the Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite. And what we do is we put the Dolby Atmos Mastering Suite on a separate computer. Your DAW will run on one computer, and we will actually send audio and metadata to the computer with the mastering suite or the renderer via something like Dante or Madi or something like this. And then from there, the renderer will create the monitoring, you'll create a master file, you will do your binaural output, everything the same. You see the top level, that is the cinema renderer. The bottom level is the home entertainment renderer. It is slightly different at this point. It will kind of converge at some end, I don't know. But the concept is exactly the same. You have the nice big DAW, and this DAW is probably a very advanced DAW, like a Pro Tools HDX system or a Nuage or something kind of thing, a very big scale kind of DAW. And then from there, that just manages hundreds and hundreds of tracks. And then after that, we send 128 tracks to the renderer on a separate computer. This renderer will do all the processing. The one extra difference between the mastering suite and the production suite is that the mastering suite comes with EQs. And the reason why it comes with EQs is because we assume that you would have a 7.1.4 setup or some multi-speaker setup that requires calibration and alignment. So for the mastering suite, we built in EQs to help you calibrate this, and is part of the company we bought many years ago called Lake. Some of your live sound guys might remember a very alien spaceship looking device called the Dolby Lake EQ, which looks as if somebody took a control panel of some spacecraft, some alien spacecraft. I totally love that stuff. Worked with many system engineers tuning speakers using that stuff. And the EQs in the Dolby Atmos mastering suite has some resemblance to the Lake EQ. We use that to calibrate the speakers, and usually the full on setup will come with something like a 7.1.4 setup, which is again left, center, right in the front. There's side surrounds, rear surrounds, and four speakers set up on the ceiling, and that will represent the space. And the mastering suite has EQs on any of these channels to do that. And because it's separated, it can handle a lot of workload, because you could be running like a HDX2 or HDX3 system on the DAW computer, and then you have this other computer that's running the DAMS. And just for you to understand, as you read all your YouTube and articles later in the forum, when we say the RMU, which I'm quite sure you have seen this term, it just simply means the computer with some kind of renderer built in, either cinema renderer or the Dolby Atmos production suite or the Dolby Atmos mastering suite. So we just, and they are in a separate computer. The simplest way to explain it is simply just saying that, okay, it's a rendering mastering unit. So they call the RMU. And that's how it works. And so I've kind of shown you the most easier setup, which is all in one computer, and try to mix Atmos monitoring headphones via binaural. Or you got a full on setup, which, you have big control surface, full on HDX processing, and then running 128 channels via MADI or Dante to the renderer, and the renderer coming out with the 12 speakers monitoring, or even 64 speakers monitor, or 32 speaker monitoring in the cinema itself, like how the cinema works. So that's the full on setup versus the little laptop setup. This is also better because, processing is done. However, the cost escalates a lot more than buying a MacBook Pro. The complexity of the system also expands, but it's great with picture as well, because these two things are all sync in time code, and then it's great for pictures, just like what cinema does. And this is the setup. And yeah, and you have Maverick Studios in KL, very near you guys, having a full-on 91.6 setup. I think it's Adam speakers. And then I think JD says some of them are here today in this talk. So yeah, big shout out to you. This is a very early stage Dolby Atmos post-production studio that I kind of helped put together. They, I think they're very busy now mixing a few singles or albums for, for some record companies. Sounded amazing. It was the first real 916 setup done very properly. Kudos to the engineers like Paul Morrison and all this. I think Raymond or something putting it together. I was there. It sounded great. It's kind of where I took this picture. Yeah, big shout out to you guys out there, and they were very nice. Also, they helped me showcase to some people of how it sounds like. And like I said, give them a buzz, give them a call if you want to hear, and then they can also explain it as good as me what Dolby Atmos production is. And in fact, they can even show you on the spot how they mix it and stuff. I've heard the works from them. I think they have done an Atmos mix for Netflix, although it wasn't really released. They use it as a native workflow. That means you can actually mix in Atmos but export 5.1, or mix in Atmos export stereo, because there are some future proving benefits in doing that. But obviously, you want to hear the full on immersive thing. But yeah, so check this out, this Maverick Studio somewhere in KL. And then, okay, so that's pretty much it for Studios Atmos. And the other good thing that we like to do with Dolby Atmos is actually live broadcast. And we actually have live broadcasts of Dolby Atmos globally. Not so much in Malaysia yet, but then again, I'm not sure if you know that your very big cable TV, Astro in Malaysia, actually broadcast the recent UEFA, the Euro Cup, UEFA games in Dolby Atmos. So I think that was something they offered. I'm not sure if you heard it. If you have heard it, I've heard it, and I thought it sounded really, really good. But in Malaysia, also kudos to Astro. They went full on to do this, and that's why for this talk, I actually included the live versions because it was just only like a couple of months back where UEFA was there. For the semi-finals onwards, Astro were broadcasting it in Atmos. And if you had a home theater system or soundbar, you could technically receive it and actually enjoy as if you were sitting here. Although in today's context, this is not going to happen for a little while. We're all kind of stuck at home. But it's good to know that if you had a sound system and sat at home, you could still feel the passion of the pitch and to feel the excitement and the glory and the happiness of the fans. Of course, you also will feel the agony and all this when they didn't get the ball. Yeah, it's a really nice experience to have, especially in this day and age whereby, sitting in a stadium like this, like literally here, sitting here next to this guy is virtually impossible right now. And I do miss this quite a lot. Not that I'm a football fan, but, going to music concerts and watching movies and stuff where you're enjoying content or enjoying with many people when things are unfolding, that feeling you can't get sitting at home watching Netflix or watching sports on TV. So Dolby Atmos brings you one step closer, which makes it feels very good. And so I just wanted to touch on some so that people have an understanding, so that in case in the crowd there were people that were from broadcast station, might actually think about doing live Atmos to actually bring that immersive experience to the home of a live event. The thing about Atmos live is slightly different from our post-production workflow. We just get a nice mixer, like a live mix console. And again, the same thing, the host, the musician, the audience. This is like EVS is, I think broadcast to understand what EVS are. BGM, this is a cut, a system 360, I think. It's a cut playback system where you play back audio and sound effects. Put all that into a mixer, and then we mix what we call our so-called three-dimensional space, and it is still very much a channel-based input, channel-based immersive approach, not like the object-based hybrid approach. The object-based thing happens slightly later in the 591 encoder. Because we are mixing it live, you can't draw the automation and do pans, so precisely and everything. So what we do is we actually create a three-dimensional sound field in a 5.1.4 mix for Atmos, and then we send it into our encoder. I call this a 591 encoder because this was the first product we developed to do this. However, I think this product is being replaced soon, and there are new encoders coming on the market that does this. So what we do is we mix a 514 channel-based approach mix using a mixer. There are a few mixers on the market that can support a 514, mainly, the sports mixing mixer or the broadcast mixers. I've seen somebody actually mix 514 on Yamaha mixers as well. It just depends how you do it. I mean, everyone knows that a simple Yamaha QL1 can actually mix in 5.1, or CL5 can mix in 5.1. I've actually done 5.1 shows on CL5s, and then we can find ways to put in the 4 as well, and as long as we can monitor it. And we use this object authoring tool. This three devices here, or these two devices here, actually forms what we call our renderer. One to do the encoding and one to do the object authoring. So it's the same thing. The renderer is your 590, 591 and stuff. This thing is being replaced by a Telos encoder now. The audio console like Stage Tech, SSL, Lao, Correct, they can support this 514 and like say even Yamaha. And what we do is we send a 514 PCM and then we get it encoded to a contribution codec like ED2. I think if you're from Astro, you'll be very familiar with what we call Dolby E. And that is our contribution codec, that another technologies that sends contribution audio so that it can be repackaged for distribution audio. And then we will transmit by our distribution codec, which is Dolby Digital Plus. the same as how the renderer will also export a MP4 with Dolby Digital Plus, as I mentioned earlier, or showed in the slide earlier. So this is the 590. We also have three-dimensional rendering. So what we do is we will put the 0.4 into the edges of the square, and then after that we have the 5.1. So this is something like the bed, and then we have the objects like this, and then we can also put the PA feed right in center, or the objects can be something like an alternate so-called alternate language, and we can choose to use this object or not. And we have what we call a presentation. So we can have a normal full-on immersive, or we can have select another thing, and then what we do is we can have alternate language and stuff like this, and have different presentation to provide different feeds to different people. This might not sound relevant to those people who are in studios doing post-production work. For a live broadcast scenario, this is very, very relevant, because if you are mixing shows or sports predominantly, you will actually encounter many situations where you are doing multiple mixes that is sending out of your OB truck to different places, and we are actually doing different mixes, and you are actually, like octopus hand all over the place trying to react and while listening to the instructions of the director. So in our DP590, we can create different presentations that have different combinations of tracks to create different presentations. This is the future of broadcast technology. Is not really implemented yet. It can be done. So what we can do in the future is, like, for example, back to the football, we can say, okay, for this presentation is for the home fans, and this present for the away fans, so that it will turn on the mics that is on the home fans, so that you will hear the same scream and passion and agony at the same time, and not hear the away fans, away team fans and stuff like this. So you can actually what we call personalized audio as you want to watch the TV. Or some people in some ways don't even like to have the commentator saying things, or don't agree with commentator and decided to say, okay, I just want a full-on crowd sound. I don't want to hear the commentator talk. I just want to feel it and watch it and hear the whistle and stuff like this. So you can also do that. You can choose your own personalization. It is not being done as yet today, but the technology is there to make it full-on possible. We are just lacking the devices coordination, where the devices have the menu, or the broadcasters have the menu where you can choose what audio you want to personalize. But this is a technology that I'm just sharing with you. But if you want to do a full-on Dolby Atmos immersive live production, you could do it today. You just need a few hardware boxes from us or from our partners who have developed the hardware boxes for us, and you're ready to go. Honestly, to make something like 514 and get this full-on immersive experience is not difficult at all, and especially if in Malaysia, where you have worked for Astro, you would have actually delivered 5.1 mixers, and you're familiar with 5.1, right? And you're just adding 4 more speakers on the ceiling, right? And this is the monitoring for 514. It's the same thing. It's just that, again, 4 speakers, just that it's based on a 5.1 setup. And this is an OB truck that has a full-on 5.1 setup. So you can see the Genelex 5.1 here, and then you have the ceiling speakers up here. I'm not sure if you can see it. But this is a nice truck. I think this truck is a truck in somewhere in China. You can see this is the typical 514 setup. Yeah, and if I'm not wrong, this should be a stage tech mixer. So to kind of conclude everything, Dolby Atmos is the first so-called immersive audio format that could have been produced, transmitted, and actually enjoyed. And Dolby is the one company that does it end to end. With this format, we managed to bring immersive experience from cinema to living rooms to mobile devices, or to anything that carried our technology to decode it, and future-proof the content with the ability to render any channel-based audio output. I find that very, very appealing for somebody like me, because I could have done a good mix today, but I know that if somebody wanted something wider in the future, I couldn't. I have to go back to the mixing console and rethink my mix altogether, and to think, okay, now I have a rear speaker. What should I put on the rear speaker? With Atmos, I just think 3D, and then it will just take care of stereo for me, or 5.1 for me. And just to really add to the fact that even if you listen to 5.1, what the render would have done was to take the high information and process it and actually put into the 5.1 speaker. So even you are listening to an Atmos mix in 5.1, you would hear or experience some form of immersive. It won't be as good as if you had 4 high speakers or 2 high speakers, but you would still hear the difference because the renderer has incorporated and processed the audio to kind of try to virtualize some of that effect with the 5.1 speakers. Same as when that 5.1 speakers are actually down mix or down render. We don't call it down mix because we call it render with Dolby Atmos to a stereo version where if you had mixed stereoly, natively in stereo, the Dolby Atmos derived stereo would have still sounded better because there is some high information rendered into the stereo mix. This gives it a very good future proving kind of thing because you never know. People, 50 years ago, Beatles was probably given a pen knob. They were looking at music in stereo, in mono, and then they will say, okay, let's look at music in stereo, and they didn't quite know what to do with it, and they tried putting the band on the left speaker and the vocal on the right speaker, and then because they were still thinking in mono, I guess because they'll think, I can just do that, but if somebody has stereo, will do this. Think about you sitting in Abbey Road 50 years ago with the Beatles or something, like, okay, now we have stereo and now we have Atmos, so what do we do with Atmos? Now we not only can have sound in front of you, we can have sound behind you, the left and right of you, and on top of you. One of the speaker manufacturing speaker. So somebody from the speaker manufacturer who speaks said something recently that I thought was very good. He says, when I hear Atmos, when you hear stereo, I'm just listening to the front wall. When I hear Atmos, I'm listening to the front wall, the rear wall, the side walls, and the ceiling. So I thought that was a very great way to metaphor how Atmos feels to me as well. I can hear everything all around. Just imagine now you're in the studio and you are given this ability to render or to create, to position sound all around you. What would you do, right? Is there a new way to look at music? In films, it makes a very direct sense because as stuff is flying around you, it's very easy to match the audio to the picture. But when it comes to music, there's so much more imagination to do this. Instead of being the band playing in front of you, you can feel like you're standing right in the stage in the middle of the band and the band is playing all around you. Is there a different perception to the groove? Is there a different perception to how we stage music? I don't know. There's many questions that, I'm still constantly experimenting every day. With Dolby Atmos, again, this is the first time the distribution is ensured by the same company. For years, sound engineers have just done stereo and we just squash it and we tweak it to the best it can sound and say, okay, good luck. Hopes it plays back well in some other speaker because we have done our due diligence to make sure that it was bright enough, it was bassy enough, the bass was tight enough, it had the loudness so that it could shine on radio and stuff like this. But with Dolby Atmos, leave it to Dolby to take care of that. If we don't think about sound, we think about food, like how we started this phone call with a phone order. Like you don't order the fried chicken anymore, delivered to you fried. We actually deliver the chicken with the spices and the instruction how to fry it so that it will adapt to anybody's place. And if people want to have a full-on dinner with knife and fork, they could. If they want to carry that dinner in a box and walk and eat, they could do that. So it's something along those lines whereby the distribution is ensured by the company that created the format. And to really conclude, what Dolby tries to do is bring spectacular experience for your content. We are an end-to-end solution from production, transmission to playback. And we have done this with well thought out production workflows and professional practices. So there are people like me working in Dolby that understand studios, understand production workflows, engineers that understand broadcasting, engineers that understand building our OEM devices. And that's how we put all these bricks together to develop and to produce or bring value add to an entertainment ecosystem. And the best part is we provide support just like this throughout the whole ecosystem. This is an immersive audio solution for the next generation. That's what really Dolby Atmos is in a nutshell. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I haven't taken too much time, and there are quite a few questions, I hope.
Thank you so much, Geoffrey. Yeah, there are already a few in the chat already, which I've been keeping track of, so we'll definitely get down to that, okay? So, thank you so much, Geoffrey. This is definitely a very, very fascinating and interesting subject. Even though I've watched some previous presentations before, I'm always learning something new all the time. There is always something new to discover.